AMD's stock price was down 8.9% on the day following the announcement of tariffs on trading partners of the United States. Investors are concerned about AMD stock and other tech stocks as well, but I'm focusing on AMD in this video. And they want to know if it's time to sell AMD stock, if there's more pain to come, or if this is a buying opportunity for long-term investors that are interested in AMD stock. I'll evaluate the business, the categories AMD operates, and then I'll revisit valuation. I'll share with you my discounted cash flow model for AMD so you can see what I calculated as the fair value for this business. And then I'll look at the forward price to earnings valuation now that the price has fallen by so much. And I'll update my recommendation for AMD stock after accounting for these added risks to answer if I still think AMD is a top stock to buy.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.
So I wanted to look at AMD's segment results here so we can get an overview of the categories AMD operates, where are the biggest risks, and if we're comfortable with those risks. Now, these results were reported by AMD on February 4th, 2025. So they're relatively recent. These are the most up-to-date results we have from AMD. We're not going to get an update on AMD's business, inclusive of tariffs, for several more months. Even the upcoming earnings release will not likely include the impact of tariffs. We probably won't see that updated, impacted business financials for several months down the line. So 4 major segments for AMD's business: data center, client, gaming, and embedded. The growth segments are data center and client, and most notably data center. This is where the company generates revenue selling to enterprises that are building data centers optimized for artificial intelligence. This is one of the biggest growth categories in the world right now. This is where NVIDIA is benefiting considerably. These are the categories where Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet are increasing their investments. Meta platforms can be included in that list. And AMD's business is now a lot more concentrated in that category, in that very fast growing category, which is what you like to see as an investor. If you compare AMD's business today versus 1 year ago, right? Look at in 2023, AMD's overall revenue, roughly 1/4 of the overall business was concentrated in the data center business, right? Roughly 1/4, about $6.5 billion in revenue over, a company that generated a total of about $24 billion in revenue, $23 billion, right? Fast forward to today, the data center segment generated $12.5 billion in revenue, while the overall business generated 12, 19, 21, 24 billion. So the overall business is still around 24, 25 billion, but now the mix is different. Now you're getting a business with a 50% allocation from data center revenue, which is important because that's the segment that's growing and is likely to grow or is forecasted to grow for at least another decade, versus having a business that's more concentrated, let's say, on client and gaming, which the client segment is personal computer sales to consumers and enterprises. That market is not growing. That's a saturated market. We're going to see a replacement cycle there that's going to create a short-term boom in revenue for client segment business. But longer term, that's not a growth category. That's a saturated category. All else being equal, you would prefer a business less concentrated to that segment. This is one of the positives I've talked about with Dell Technologies, which is experiencing a similar trend line where more of its revenue is coming from data center and less from client sales to personal computers to customers and businesses. And so that's what's happened with AMD over the last year. So now this year, it's a more attractive business than it was last year because more of its business is concentrated in the data center. That's the segment that might experience a slowdown in growth. I don't think that segment will stop growing as a result of tariffs, but the customers that AMD is selling to, which include those large cloud service providers, they may cancel or pause some of their spending plans in 2025 and in 2026 as a result of the increasing tariffs and how those increasing tariffs are impacting their revenues. So they might be more conservative on their spending plans because they are noticing slower revenue growth. They are noticing their customers are slowing their spending. So that segment is at risk here for AMD. The client segment is also at risk. The components that go into a personal computer include AMD's GPUs and CPUs, but they also include other inputs. And the semiconductor inputs, those that AMD is selling, the good news is that those have been excluded from the tariffs. So semiconductors will not have tariffs imposed on them specifically. Now that might change, right? Because the president has done these on and off again types of things. The important thing to remember is AMD does outsource the manufacturing of its semiconductor chips to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is mostly outside of the United States. They are investing more in the United States. That's going to give AMD an opportunity to buy locally, perhaps, and thereby, permanently avoid the tariffs. But that remains to be seen. But that is something that AMD can do to offset the impact of these tariffs. But the end markets is where AMD is most at risk to right now. The customers that are buying AMD's chips might slow down the purchases because of what they're seeing from their customers. That's the biggest risk here for AMD and AMD stock investors, but that's a temporary thing. Okay? So if semiconductors continue to be excluded from the tariffs, then AMD's risks are temporary, which are the opportunities I look for. Businesses trading at cheaper valuations because of temporary factors. Now, some businesses are not going to experience a temporary increase in cost. Their increases are going to be more permanent. And those are not as attractive in this current environment. So as I'm doing my research and as you're doing your research, that should be a primary area of focus for you is identifying which companies are going to experience a permanent increase in cost and which companies are going to experience a temporary slowdown in business as a result of the slowing economic activity, which will recover eventually. Business will resume, right? Business never stops. It might slow down, but then it resumes, and that provides an opportunity. So now let's look at valuation. After the 9% decline, I think AMD stock is even more undervalued. I already thought it was undervalued, right? If you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've had AMD rated as one of my top stocks to buy this year. My intrinsic value calculation updated this morning or this afternoon has it valued at $151 a share. The current market price is $93.80. So undervalued according to this calculation. And AMD stock is now trading close to its 52-week low, which was $93.64. So you're buying this stock at very near the cheapest it's been, the current market price for a year. And then when I measured it on a forward price to earnings basis at a forward PE of 15, it's the cheapest it's been according to this metric going back 3 years. So in both accounts I approach with valuation, AMD stock looks cheap. The risks are elevated, to be sure. There are higher risks now. There is no certainty that the exclusion for semiconductors will remain in this administration, where the president likes tariffs as a negotiating tool, as a tool to govern the country. this president seems attracted to tariffs. So, companies that are bringing in products from overseas, like AMD is doing, are exposed to that risk. And that's not going to go away until there is a reliable supplier inside the United States. Hello, Intel, could it be you? Or maybe Taiwan Semiconductor increases its manufacturing base in the US and AMD can source locally for its semiconductors sold here in the United States. So overall, I'm going to reiterate my recommendation, and I'm keeping AMD stock as listed as one of my top 9 stocks to buy right now. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce a brand new private Discord for our channel members at the VIP Discord level. It's a great place to connect with me directly, engage with like-minded investors, and learn more and take your investing to the next level. Spots are limited, so join now before it's too late.